Our next step is to strengthen internal controls to also stop the siphoning of public funds by unscrupulous civil servants through dubious allowances and expenses, just as we must also have controls to stop greedy private sector players from stealing public funds through procurement monopolies and inflated prices. I'm therefore hopeful and confident that this House will insist that this priority of strengthening internal controls within MDAs be reflected in its budgetary considerations. For my part, I have already stated recently that I have no interest in having in my cabinet individuals who either neglect or weaken or exploit the internal controls designed to stop corruption dead in its tracks within their institutions. Regardless of which party in the Tonse Alliance a member of the executive belongs to, if I am not satisfied with their stewardship of the interests of Malawians, I will replace them, because by the end of the day, they all answer to me. And additionally, Madam Speaker, I will soon be receiving recommendations from the task force I delegated the Vice President to lead in proposing a new structure for the civil service with stronger internal controls for service contracts, procurement procedures, and allowances. As such, you can expect those proposals to form part of my legislative agenda and guide my expectations of ministers in the coming year. Madam Speaker, our second weapon against corruption and public accountability through governance institutions that are well equipped and well led to probe the integrity of transactions in both the public and the private sector. Without strong and brave leaders at the helm of oversight and law enforcement bodies like the Malawi Police Service, MPS, the Anti-Corruption Bureau, ACB, the Malawi Revenue Authority, MRA, the Financial Intelligence Authority, FIA, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets, PPDA, the Directorate of Public Prosecution, DPP, the National Audit Office, NAO, and the Ombudsman, our declaration of war against corruption will remain cosmetic at best. In this regard, I must register my dismay and disappointment with the Public Appointments Committee of this House for its recent decision to reject my appointee for the post of Director General for ACB. Not only does this decision deny Malawians the services of a strong warrior, but it also delays our plan to empower the ACB to recruit additional prosecutors and implement the National Anti-Corruption Strategy 2 of 2019 to 2024. I therefore call on this House to put political and personal interests aside and do its part in accelerating the change Malawians fought for. Homeland Security. Madam Speaker, fighting crimes like corruption can only succeed as a collaborative effort between different stakeholders. One indispensable stakeholder is the Ministry of Homeland Security, under whose watch Malawians are kept safe through the work of such institutions as the Malawi Police Service and the Department of Immigration. It is therefore critical for us to continue strengthening this ministry, and toward that end, my administration will take the following measures in the 2021-2022 financial year. We will continue the infrastructure development projects for the staff of our security agencies. We will continue rebuilding the public image of and restoring public trust in the police. We will recruit 3,000 police constables and 2,500 police officers and train 200 general detectives and 250 drug detectives and 150 prosecutors. With the capacity of border security to deal with transnational crimes, such as smuggling of our subsidized human trafficking, money laundering, and killing of persons with albinism. And we will improve the national registration system by opening more national registration centers across the country to reduce congestion at registration centers and the waiting period for the national identity card. Local government. Madam Speaker, despite my administration's emphasis on the rule of law being upheld by law enforcement agencies in the executive arm of government, our first line of defense against lawlessness and disorder is the proper running of district councils, which are integral to a decentralized approach to governance. And to this end, we are on course to expedite the institutionalization of a performance-based contract and financing system for the councils, which will in turn make it easier to identify and clear the rubble of non-performers therein. To demonstrate our resolve, my administration will be coordinating and implementing a $100 million governance to enable service delivery GESD project in all 28 district councils aimed at enhancing their performance. Madam Speaker, while on the subject of decentralized governance approach, I am mindful in my maiden State of the Nation address last year, I had already committed my government to fast-tracking the decentralization of transport and public works, lands, mines, tourism, and culture and energy. Although this process has suffered delays, we are determined to accelerate it in order to complete it within the time frame that I had stated that time. Meanwhile, the development budget to the local councils, worth $12.2 billion, has already been devolved, as has the payment of honoraria for chiefs to eliminate payment delays and fraud. Another key decentralization-related commitment of my administration is the creation of secondary cities in line with Malawi's 2063's concept of rural growth centers that act as bridges between urban and rural development. Toward this end, my administration's vision to develop lakeshore cities, Karonga, Nkarabe, Salima, Mangochi, is a must, albeit with the inclusion of Kota Kota, as is our long-term plan of turning Liwonde, Kasungu, Bangula, and Luchenza into secondary cities. Knowing that government cannot achieve this alone, I invite our development partners and the private sector to engage my administration on partnering up in this area. These investments in governance and decentralization, reform and digitization are designed to accelerate the delivery of our promise to create jobs, wealth, and food security. Let me talk about the state of change for the citizenry as part 4 of my address. Madam Speaker, this August House is aware that in 2015, the United Nations member states, including Malawi, adopted a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for the people and the planet, the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Since then, Malawians have faced numerous challenges that threaten their attainment of SDGs. More recently, the report by UNDP entitled, quote, "Leaving No One Behind, Impact of COVID-19 on the SDGs," end of quote, indicates that the long-term social and economic impact of the pandemic is increasing inequality and significantly affecting the realization of the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. The poverty gap is therefore set to rise, with 80% set to be pushed into extreme poverty if there is no intervention. However, there is potential to exceed the development trajectory with an ambitious but feasible set of targeted investments in governance, green economy, and digitization, among others. The combination of bold policy choices and investments made domestically and supported by the international community would help us achieve human development sooner and reach the SDG targets. Madam Speaker, with this recognition, our intervention in this environment has saved lives and livelihoods. In line with the policy of not leaving any, which is SDG number 1, and end hunger, achieve food security, SDG 2, we remain committed to addressing all forms of poverty in the country. The National Social Support Policy, aimed at providing a coordinated and multidimensional approach towards implementation of social protection programs, is under review. In this context, Madam Speaker, you will recall that I had mentioned at the outset that another accelerator we will be investing in to speed up the delivery of jobs, wealth, and food security is the development of human capital to maintain a healthy, skilled, educated, informed, environmentally safe, and unified citizenry. Please allow me to touch on the facets of this second delivery accelerator in assessing the physical, social, and mental capacity of our citizens to run towards the promised land of jobs, wealth, and food security. As the biblical story of the Israelites teaches us, it is no use to bring a people to the gates of the promised land if they do not have the capacity to fight for it and possess it. We must understand that even though God instituted government to create the conditions for reaching the promised land, no citizen's portion of that land is given on a silver platter. We must accelerate our citizens' possession of it by building their capacity to possess it. For my administration, developing the capacity of our citizens will focus on specific priorities in line with Malawi 2063 in the areas of health, education, information, land, social welfare and protection, and environmental protection. Priorities in health. Madam Speaker, in my first State of the Nation address, I committed my administration to the goal of ensuring that there is a health service every 5-kilometer radius. For this to happen, we intend to pursue the ambition I set last year to construct 900 health posts and staff accommodation in hard-to-reach areas by the year 2022. In the meantime, at community level, we will continue promoting and strengthening the use of digital health through an integrated community health information system that promises to transform community health care delivery and harmonize all community health data. Madam Speaker, through circumstances beyond our control, we have had to make the war on COVID-19 pandemic a top priority for the protection of Malawians. The second wave of the pandemic, which started at the end of December 2020 up to April 2021, was particularly devastating and claimed more than 1,150 lives. As a result, I declared a state of national disaster on January 12, 2021, to facilitate optimum multi-stakeholder response and reverse the trend in both cases and deaths. To respond to the pandemic, government developed and implemented the National Coronavirus Disease COVID-19 Preparedness and Response Plan, which outlines operational procedures for preparedness, and response to the pandemic based on identified risks. To capacitate our response systems, I ordered the Treasury to release $17.5 billion for the mitigation of the pandemic. This was in addition to the $7.5 billion and $6.2 billion allocations made previously. As this august House is aware, I personally ordered an audit of the $6.2 billion COVID-19 funds following a report by the Ombudsman about indications that some of the funds had been abused. Once the independent audit report was out, my administration was then able to take actions based on evidence presented to me, including dozens of arrests. In my public announcement of those actions, I also announced that other public funds would be audited as well, so that the evidence can be used to identify and clear more rubble from state machinery. As part of our fight against COVID-19 pandemic, my administration successfully rolled out a nationwide COVID-19 vaccination program in March this year. As of yesterday, about 325,797 people had been vaccinated across the country. More avenues for securing additional vaccines are being explored, for I have categorically refused to let our citizens be inoculated with expired vaccines. If it's not good enough for use in the Northern Hemisphere, then it's not good enough for use in the Southern Hemisphere. Priorities in education. Madam Speaker, in my maiden State of the Nation address, I committed my administration to the implementation of our manifesto pledge to make primary education compulsory to ensure that no child is left behind. This pledge aligns with Malawi 2063's concept of 12 years of compulsory basic schooling for all children. This is a pledge we are committed to honor, just as we have honored our pledge to unbundle the University of Malawi by gazetting the 4th May 2021 as the commencement date of the standalone universities. We have also successfully increased the enrollment into the university from 36,000 students in the 2019-2020 academic year to 45,809 students, which is no mean achievement in a year of COVID restrictions. Our target is to hit an enrollment of 48,000 in the 2021-2022 fiscal year. Meanwhile, our quest for funding for construction of Mbela University for the study of animal sciences is underway. Additionally, in the 2021-2022 financial year, we will accelerate the completion of school infrastructure projects, including Chikwawa, Mchinji, and Rumpi teacher training colleges, and the expansion of Domas College of Education with support from JICA. Just 2 days ago, I presided over a commencement of the construction of 200 rural secondary schools under Secondary Education Expansion Development SEED project in partnership with the U.S. government, which will especially be a game changer in according the girl child a door of escape from the horrors of early marriage, early pregnancy, sexual violence, and HIV infection. Priorities in lands, housing, and urban development. Madam Speaker, you may recall that I directed a halt to the implementation of the 2016 Land Act and ordered a review of the same. The review was done, and the newly reviewed land laws will go into force in the 2021-2022 financial year. Madam Speaker, you may also wish to know that my administration is committed to the provision of decent housing to public servants. As such, we have started the construction of the 10,000 houses for secured institutions as follows: 4,000 for Malawi Defense Force, 4,000 for Malawi Police Service, 1,000 for Malawi Immigration Services, and 1,000 for Malawi Prison Service. Going forward, my administration will also do the following. We will designate 5,000 hectares of land to Malawi Investment and Trade Center, MITC, in the next 5 years for allocation to investors. 2, we will finish developing the land information system, which will record 52,000 hard copy files from all regional land offices for better land management. And we will recapitalize the public service housing scheme and review the public service housing scheme treasury fund order so that public servants can access mortgage loans to build their own houses. Priorities in youth, gender, and social welfare. Madam Speaker, the development of the capacity of our nation's youth and women is an indispensable accelerator of our delivery of the priority outcome of creating jobs, wealth, and food security. Toward that end, my administration has done the following. We implemented an out-of-school youth functional literacy program at 174 learning centers to provide alternative learning opportunities to the youth in Nsanje, Chikwawa, Cholo, Machinga, Korakora, Karabe, Salima, Dedza, and Mangochi, with an enrollment of 5,200 learners. We commenced the construction of skills centers and the Jobs for Youth, J4Y, project in 4 training institutions, namely Gar Community Technical College, CTC in Karonga, Bandira CTC in Kotakota, Naminchiwa CTC in Palombe, and Neno Integrated Youth Development Center. And we commenced the construction of the Griffin Sayenda Indoor Sports Complex at Area 48 in Lilongwe City, scheduled for completion by August 2021. Madam Speaker, going into the 2021-2022 financial year, my administration will begin implementing the National Youth Service I promised Malawians during the campaign. Its purpose will be to foster civic engagement, national identity, skilling and job creation for the youth, and recovery and rehabilitation. I must also mention that in the context of the rollout of the National Youth Service, we will continue existing initiatives for the skilling of our youth. These initiatives will include expansion of 7 national technical colleges, namely Sochi, Nasawa, Lilongwe, Salima, Namitete, Mzuzu, and Livingstonia. We will also work with the European Union to enable community technical colleges to equip more youth with technical, entrepreneurial, and vocational skills, as well as to unlock employment opportunities for them through our job centers. Social protection. Madam Speaker, government continues to reach out to the poorest and most vulnerable Malawians in rural areas through the Social Cash Transfer Program. With a registered total of 293,000 households, an enhanced public works program of 10,000 registered households. As a result of our intervention in this manner, our most vulnerable citizens are still able to put food on their tables. Additionally, my administration implemented a COVID-19 urban cash intervention targeting the 4 cities of Blantyre, Lilongwe, Zomba, and Mzuzu. Approximately 160,000 households in the 4 cities have received cash transfers of 35,000 kwacha each for 3 months between January and April 2021, which has cushioned those who depend on a daily wage or petty trading to survive. Even so, for the sake of sustainability, we are complementing these social protection measures with graduation-type interventions. The idea is for us to pursue the reform of shock-sensitive social protection system so that over time, the need for year-on-year emergency response is reduced. At the same time, we are scaling up the electronic payment system used for social protection programs to ease transactions and cut out fraud. Parallel to this, we will continue to roll out unified beneficiary registry system with the aim of consolidating and harmonizing the targeting and enrolling of beneficiaries into different social protection programs so that no ward that needs this intervention is missed. Priorities in information and civic education. Madam Speaker, to prepare our citizens for the work of harvesting the fruits of the seeds we are sowing today, we must harness an informed citizenry. This is why my administration has taken the bold step of operationalizing the Access to Information Act to make government accountable to the public in the spirit of servant leadership. Under the Ministry of Civic, we have launched the National Civic Education Policy and disseminated educated regarding COVID-19 response and preventative measures. Going civic education in our schools to raise a generation of patriotic citizens. Priorities in climate change and the environment. Madam Speaker, Malawi 2063 places emphasis on the need to look after the environment as a key to sustainable development. In pursuit of this, my administration has led the way in promoting sustainable waste management practices in the country and instilling a culture of cleanliness and positive behavioral change. I personally designated the second Friday of every month as a National Cleanup Day, and I thank all Malawians for their enthusiasm to be part of it. However, one environmental challenge of great concern to me is the depletion of our forests and loss of our biodiversity through the wanton cutting of trees and burning of charcoal. I have no kind words for this state of things, for if we continue destroying our own environment, we are courting trouble for ourselves and even more for our children. To counter this, my administration has overseen the implementation of activities on the phase-out of ozone-depleting substances, the integration of environmental considerations into programs, the planting of over 55 million trees, and the patrolling of our forests and reserves, all of which we intend to scale up going forward. We also plan to facilitate the establishment and operationalization of the Malawi Environmental Protection Authority, MEPA, finalize atomic energy regulations, protect 88 forest reserves, and 20 state-owned industrial plantations, and complete the review of the Forest Act. Madam Speaker, of necessity in the management of our environment and natural resources during the fiscal year ending was a focus on water resources management and development through, among others, the construction of the North Rukuru River flood protection structure in Karonga, soon to be completed, and increased coverage of the population with safe drinking water in urban and town centers serviced by the water boards from 3.4 million to 3.6 million. Going into the 2021-2022 financial year, government initiatives for the management of water resources will include the following: rehabilitating and extending Mangochi Water Supply Scheme and upgrade Liwonde Balaka Water Supply Scheme under Southern Region Water Board, implementing the Lilongwe Water Supply and Sanitation Project and the raising of the Kamuzu Dam 1 to increase water supply and coverage within Lilongwe, and commencing the construction of the new water source to augment the existing water sources for Blantyre City. The state of the change in the economy, it's a fifth part of my address. Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the state of the economy. I will give an account of how the economy has performed in the 10 months of my administration in the broader context of Malawi 2063 and the narrower context of creating jobs, wealth, and food security. The aspirations outlined in Malawi 2063 are anchored on the three pillars of agricultural productivity and commercialization, industrialization, and urbanization. Currently, the first 10-year implementation plan is being developed. It is around these three pillars that my administration's future economic policies, strategies, and action will center to ensure that Malawi attains middle income status by 2030. Madam Speaker, at this point, let me restate the obvious, that a significant number of economic activities in this country occur in the informal sector, outside the regulated and recorded economy. In addition, the structure of the economy has been changing over time. To take these realities into account, in 2020, the government rebased its gross domestic product, GDP 10, as the base year to use in 2017 as the base year. Consequent to this development, the economy's GDP rose from 6.05 trillion kwacha, that is to say, 8.3 billion US dollars, to 8.1 trillion kwacha, that is to say, 10.9 billion US dollars, representing a 34% jump in the size of the economy. Before rebasing, Malawi's debt stock of 3.7 trillion kwacha was equivalent to 62.1% of GDP. After rebasing, the same debt stock was equivalent to 45.7%, which, of necessity, improved Malawi's measure of debt sustainability. Another development of economic significance that took place during the year relates to the decision of government in December 2020 to change the fiscal year from starting 1st July of each year to 1st April of each year. This change will take effect from 1st April 2022 and will ease government's ability to fund public institutions involved in the agricultural production cycle. This follows the realization that budgets appropriated in June and implemented from July are late for timely provision of resources for importation of agricultural inputs. Besides, the new fiscal year will facilitate early funding for ADMARC and National Food Reserve Agency, NFRA, to compete favorably in purchasing smallholder agricultural produce. Economic performance. Madam Speaker, during my maiden State of the Nation address, I informed this House that in 2020, the economy would grow in real terms by 1.9%, as measured by gross domestic product, down from an initial estimate of 5.5%, following the onset of the first wave of COVID-19. This growth rate was, however, revised downwards again to 1.5% in August and 0.9% in October due to the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Madam Speaker, the spread of COVID-19 pandemic and its attendant containment measures, including partial lockdown and decongestion of workplaces, had significant impact on the economic performance of the different sectors of the economy, including tourism and accommodation, transportation and storage services, wholesale and retail trade, and the manufacturing sector. By contrast, the agricultural sector demonstrated remarkable resilience under the same pandemic conditions and registered a positive, though modest, growth rate of 0.9% in 2020. Going forward, the 2021 economic growth rate is projected at 3.8%, down from 6.1% on account of the resurgence and persistence of COVID-19 for most of the year. This lower revised growth rate originates from estimated lower growth rates of most sectors of the economy, particularly the manufacturing sector, the construction sector, the wholesale and retail sector, trade sector, and transportation. However, agriculture remains the main driver of the projected